Hi everyone, it's Alex from Risk Academy, and while we're waiting for people to join us, let's check the connection. And if you could, please write your name. If you can hear me and see the slides, please put a little plus um, and share with us where you're viewing this webinar from. Hi everyone, thank you for joining. We're just checking the connection. If you can see the slides, if you can hear me, if you can see the little video at the bottom, please put a little plus in the comment section and do share where you are viewing from, because we've got quite an international audience usually, and more people will be joining as we will start talking. It would be interesting to see where people are coming from. Hi Hans, good to see you again. Good to view you again. All right, as people join us, and I don't want to delay the start too much because this will be available to all the participants who have registered, and there's more than 150 of you in replay anyway. So let me quickly get to the point of today's discussion. I wanted to share two standards, share my personal views on each of them, and more importantly, spend probably 60% of the conversation today on what's actually happening and where can we take this update, take this opportunity, and how can we take this forward. So a couple of words about myself. Some of you have met me before. I've been in risk for 14 years. Most of my working experience is in Australia and Russia. I worked in Kazakhstan and Poland quite a lot. I have been doing consulting, then head of risk for a number of government-based organizations. Then I have been doing training at different MBA schools for quite a while. Um, myself and my colleagues run pretty much most of the risk management training and certifications for the Russian market. In 2014, I was named the Risk Manager of the Year, and I have done quite a lot of exciting projects in risk space, which I'll kind of share with you as we go through. I have published a number of books. All of them are available for free, and I'll share that with you as we go through as well. So today, before we get to the discussion about ISO 31000 versus COSO ERM, what's good in each one, and how can we benefit from both of them as risk professionals, what do you think? How do you view the fact that both the globally recognized standard ISO 31000 and the US risk management framework, which has been taken everywhere by the auditors and consultants, COSO ERM. The fact that they've just been updated, I mean, speaking of good timing, they have been updated within the period of 6 months. Do you view that as an opportunity or a threat for yourself as a risk professional? How do you view that? And there's a little pop-up voting that appears in your comments section. Please share your vote, and then I'll show you what the results are. I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. In the background, I'm seeing how the votes are distributed. It's hilarious. Come on, don't be shy. There's more of you that have voted. Do you think the fact that COSO ERM and ISO 31000 have been updated and have been published, is this a great opportunity, a missed opportunity, unfortunately, complete waste of time, or a threat to you individually as a risk professional or as a consultant in risk space? Okay, I'll close the poll and you will be able to see the results pop up in your comment section. You can collapse it and close it at any time you want. Now, most of you have mentioned that it's a great opportunity. How so? Please, don't be shy. And as one of my favorite sayings, risk management is not for shy people. So please, in the comment section, write how is it a good opportunity? Why I agree, but why do you think it's a huge opportunity? And by the way, I was so confident that most of you would recognize that this is a great opportunity that I've even created the next slide, which basically says this is not just a great opportunity. This is once in the like in 10, 15 years event that is potentially could be really, really good for the risk profession. And as we soon discover, not necessarily because something in terms of content and the messaging has changed, but more importantly, just anything new can be packaged and sold by risk professionals to the decision makers as a valuable addition or as a need for change. So we will discuss that as we go through. But do type in the comment section, why do you think the update of both the standard and the framework are a great opportunity? Or if you've said missed opportunity, do share your opinion. Why is it a missed opportunity? I mean, I also agree. There have been a lot of things that we have commented on and contributed to the working group on ISO and COSO, by the way, that they have completely ignored. And I feel that a lot of opportunities have been missed. But I'm also interested in hearing your thoughts why some people thought it was a complete waste of time. Because maybe it has, maybe I'm delusional. So here's another quick question before we get to the actual content of what's in ISO, what's new in COSO, and what are some of the differences. And let's vote on that as well. Which standard does your organization currently use? And please share your thoughts with me in the voting. Okay, not everyone voted. Come on, it's nothing to be shy about. Okay, interesting. I'll close the poll for the sake of this discussion. Maybe more people want to share their opinion. You can write it in comments. I love how someone selected COSO here in 2017. Well done on updating your approach so quickly. I'm also interested in hearing your thoughts on the people who wrote neither, because that's actually very interesting. You need something. You can't really have nothing in terms of a guidance or standard, because creating something yourself is just strange when tools are available in the market. Or not doing anything is also strange. So please share your opinion. I mean, we don't judge people. We're really interested in having some sort of conversation going. So anyway, let me first share some thoughts about ISO 31000. Those of you who know cognitive biases, uh, you will notice that ISO 31000 has been put first, and also you will notice the color selection on the slides, trying to influence you to believe that that ISO 31000 is so much better than COSO, and it is. But I'll explain that in more detail. I'm not just trying to play with your quick thinking or your sort of your fast side of your brain. So ISO 31000, the draft came out. The draft has been approved by like 96% of the countries. I I know it's been approved by Russia as well, even though myself and my colleagues were against it. But that's how bureaucracy works. A lot of changes that we proposed were simply ignored. So there was so much more that could have been done. But this is what we currently have. And basically, the current structure, the overall structure of the standard is exactly the same. What has changed in the standard? Not much. Not much. This is really that simple. Compared to 2009 version, the 2018 version is very, very similar in terms of ideas, in terms of key messages. The diagram looks different. You know, there are colors. There's blue color. There wasn't before. But you know, that's only for like silly people. You know, good risk managers, they recognize that nothing fundamentally changed. However, some of the very important messages were re-emphasized. And that, I mean, I think, you know, proper credit has to be given to the authors of the 2009 version. They probably, I mean, if we kind of disregard some of the theory that's been and some of the research happening in the decision theory and cognitive biases, they've been pretty visionary, because back in 2009 they realized that risk management for the sake of managing risks doesn't make much sense. Risk management should be performed to make better business decisions and should be integrated into core activities and key business processes and whatever the organization does. So instead of organizations starting to manage risks better, the organization should start making better business decisions and better operating with risks in mind. Now, this has been the case since 2009. Principle B and C in 2009 version already said that. And in fact, in the text of the document, it said risk management should not be a standalone management system. It should be integrated into existing way of operating. So credit should go to the original authors that there has been a lot of positive ideas that were done in the 2009 version. However, we should also mention that since I've been involved in the Mirror Committee on the Russian side, and I have been involved for a short period of time in the actual TC262, the ISO committee working on the standard, I know that there have been so many more, even more wonderful ideas. There could have been a revolution in risk management, which did not happen. So while the credit goes to the 2009 version authors, we should also say that 2018 authors really did not have the balls to do, you know, fundamental changes. Because again, this is how bureaucracy works. When you have 60 plus people voting and most of the people in the room are not even risk managers or are not even competent in what they discuss in terms of risk management, it's very difficult to contribute and implement some fundamental major changes. So what we're having is, after 5 years in the making and thousands, and that's actually not an overestimation, there were thousands of comments received. Most of the changes in the ISO 31000 are cosmetic at best and reinforcing some of the very important messages. Now, let's not take away the credit. The messages that they've chose to reinforce are the best they could have. So a lot of really good things have happened, and I'll share that with you in the next few minutes. But basically, if somebody asks you how's it different, it's not much different. But let's hold that thought. We would never admit to anyone outside of risk profession that the 2018 version is not much different, and you will see how shortly. The terms and definitions are still the same, and I'm still liking the definition of risk, and I love the definition of risk management. And this is just so critical that I wanted to bring your attention. I mean, normally I'm not a big fan of definitions in general, but I wanted to bring your attention to this particular aspect. The definition of risk management: coordinated activities to direct and control an organization with regard to risk. This is so fundamentally important. Risk management is not about risk identification, assessment, mitigation, and reporting and monitoring. Risk management is not a separate process, standalone process designated to managing risk. Risk management is how the business operates with regard to risk, or with risks in mind. That means risk management is not what you do on a quarterly basis to update the risk register. Risk management is what you do when you put out a tender, if that tender gives proper consideration to risk, and if risks are taken into account when publishing or selecting a vendor. That is risk management. Risk management is budgeting, but running additional scenarios based on the risk analysis. That's risk management. Risk management is selecting the best strategic direction or investing in projects only after risk analysis has been performed. That is risk management. That to me is just absolutely important. And I'm looking at the comments. By all means, please send through all the comments. I will then get back to them closer to the end of the webinar. So, principles. One of the fundamental areas of ISO 31000, which has been slightly reshaped. The number of principles has reduced from 11 to 8 without losing any of the important messages. All the same messages are still there. They've just been collapsed into a smaller number of principles, which is a wonderful idea. The opposite of not so wonderful idea of COSO, that decided to have more than 20 principles, completely again disregarding how human brain works, and that we are not very capable of holding in our mind more than like 3 to 7 things. Even 8 principles is a bit too much. The purpose of risk management is now documented, which is a wonderful addition. The purpose of risk management is creating and protecting value, which used to be one of the principles. In fact, it was principle A. Now it's the fundamental purpose of risk management, just in case any of you have forgotten. And by the way, I talk a lot about how the 2018 version hasn't changed much, and there's not a lot of new ideas, because kind of all of those ideas were said and mentioned before in the 2009 version. In reality, what this means, if you have a very advanced risk management in your organization, then you are fine. You don't have to do much. You actually have got everything under control. The reality is there's probably less than 1% of organizations like that in the world. That means most of the other organizations never complied with the 2009 version. I mean, compliance with the 2009 version is a weak statement, because it's a guidance standard. You can't really comply with it. But I mean, most of the risk management practices I'm seeing day in and day out are not aligned with the 2009 version ISO principles anyway. So for you, 2018 version is a nice reinforcement to start doing the right thing. The whole document is reduced in number of pages. It's much more succinct. Again, wonderful job. The shorter the document is, while still conveying exactly the same messages, which it is, it's wonderful. Again, the opposite of what COSO did. They went to 250 pages, which is nothing short of stupid. And we'll see just how stupid the document is later. The principles are ultimately the foundation of what managing risk is and what should be considered when building the framework and integrating the different processes into core activities and decision making. And principles, as I discussed in one of the videos I recently shot, principles is like the philosophy. Those are the ultimate rules that whatever you do in terms of integrating risk into decision making in core activities, it has to align one way or another with these principles. Framework. Now that's the second section. Now, despite what many people believe, framework is not a physical document. It's not a document called Risk Management Framework, which outlines all those things. Framework is it's not tangible. Framework is just a set of activities that an organization must undertake to allow risk management to be integrated. So you can't just rock up as a risk manager and say, let's integrate risk management into decision making. You have to change roles and responsibilities. You have to change policies and procedures. You have to train people. You have to give people tools. You have to monitor that this actually happens. You have to do quality control and a lot of other things. So that has been summarized under the umbrella called framework. And in fact, the standard actually says quite a lot of very, very powerful messages that I wanted to share with you. The first one is the purpose of risk management framework is to assist the organization in integrating risk management into all of its activities and functions. Now, that is a direct quote from 2009 2018 version. Sorry, I should have said. Now, the next quote is also very powerful. The effectiveness of risk management will depend on its integration into governance and all the activities of the organization, including the decision making. That means your risk management will not be effective if it's not integrated into core business activities and decision making. So that means if decisions are made, if strategic plans are made, budgets are made, investment decisions are made, procurement decisions are made, and production decisions are made without explicit, formalized, and structured and transparent consideration of risks, then you do not have an effective risk management. That is a very powerful message, because basically 99% of the risk managements that I've seen in Australia, Europe, US, Russia is not effective because it's a standalone risk management for the sake of managing risks. And while somebody is steering the risk register port, there are all those decisions that keep popping up around the business that happen without consideration of risk. Now, the scariest, I do a lot of executive education, so I try as much as possible to stop training risk managers, because there's only that much you can tell them, and unless they've got a commitment from the top, like they've got some executive support, not many of them have the courage or the drive to change things by themselves. So I try and do a lot of risk training in MBA classes and executive education, and one of the scariest, that's probably the best description. One of the scariest things I have ever heard, and it's happening all the time, is an executive saying, last year I've completed 2 or 3 multi-billion-dollar contracts. Where was your risk management then? That is the scariest thing an executive can say to a risk manager. By the way, most of the time risk managers are in the room, and they're saying, I'm taking billions of dollars of risk, and you're nowhere. You are the risk professionals, you're nowhere. You come to me at the end of the quarter to have a stupid discussion about some risks in the register, which may or may not coincidentally aligned with what I'm doing, but it's more a coincidence than anything else. So think about it. The new ISO 31000 is now reinforcing all those very important messages. They've also added management oversight and commitment, management commitments and oversight bodies responsibility, which is great. And again, they saying it's boards and executives' responsibility to ensure risk management is integrated into all organizational activities, which is a great, great message. And the message of integration is reinforced throughout the whole document, literally in every single paragraph. So the authors, in a way, have done a wonderful job, because that message of integration was always there from the 2009. And I remember when in 2010, March 2010, so 5 months after the ISO 31000 came out, I had a risk breakfast, and we had like 60 heads of risk, CROs, and I've run the same polls, and I've asked them, so given that ISO 31000 talks about integrating into the actual business instead of doing your typical risk reviews or risk assessments, do you think a lot of things will have to change in your approach? And 70% said no, they're fine. Well, it's 2009, it is 2018 now. We know these people lied. It was not true. Every single one of them had to change, but most of them were blind to the need to change. So hopefully you and everybody who will hear this webinar and all the articles I write about ISO 31000 recognizes that even though the document is not that fundamentally different from the 2009 version, you have to change your approach significantly. And the final point, risk management process, it's the last section, and that basically talks about the algorithm, that if you're going to integrate into decision making or core activities, you have to follow an algorithm. You have to identify, analyze, evaluate, treat, and so on. This section has not changed much, except for the following very important messages. A, risk management process should be an integral part of the management and decision making. It should be integrated. Risk management process, for the sake of managing risks on a quarterly, monthly, or annual basis, is not what the standard is proposing. Risk management process can be applied at any level, which was always again the case, but it's a nice reminder that risk management is not a strategic prerogative. It's not only for executives, it's part of any process. Operations of operational maintenance planning should be risk-based, just as procurement should be risk-based, just as multi-billion-dollar investment projects should be risk-based. And the next one is new, and this is absolutely critical. There can be, and this is a quote from the 2018 version, there can be many applications of risk management process. And this statement kills pretty much most of the risk management frameworks that currently exist in non-financial companies. Because what is the typical, what is the norm? The norm is to have a single document with a single methodology, single criteria for impact and likelihood, and a single approach for capturing all the risks and creating a single risk report. Well, this is the opposite of what the ISO 31000 is now saying. Again, this was always the case for the the better half of risk managers, but this is absolutely critical and very important. And I see comments coming in. Please keep them coming in. More comments, more thoughts. I will come back to all of them and respond at the end of this this presentation. There may, in fact, there should be. When I was a head of risk on one of the government sovereign funds, we had 5 different risk managements, 5 different criteria, 5 different methodologies, 5 different approaches, and there could be unlimited number of risk management processes. In fact, this whole concept of enterprise risk management, when everything comes under a single umbrella, is just plain stupid. It's actually not that useful. Speaking of ERM and that being stupid, I'm going to run another webinar on the 21st of February, where I will debate and argue and battle with Chris Mandel, a very prominent US risk professional, whether ERM is actually a useful concept or not such a useful concept, whether in fact it's actually deceitful and driving all the wrong behaviors. I've just shared the link in the comment section. Do register. That will be fun. I mean, it will be more fun than my battle with Tim Leach and Norman Marks about ISO and COSO, because it's just 2 of us, and it will be a much more lively debate. And the final thing, which is again same, it was always in the 2009 version, human behavior, human nature, cognitive biases is a huge part of risk management and should be taken into account. That means a lot of the current approaches that we use, they completely disregard like workshops, risk workshops, completely disregard the science behind cognitive biases, and should and may be avoided. So finally, this is a quick summary of ISO 31000. There are articles in the Risk Academy blog that you can read in a little bit more detail on ISO 31000. And in fact, there's quite a nice article on are you ready for the ISO 31000 and what has changed, which I recommend for you to read. Summary is very simple. It's a nice update. It looks better. It has some very important messages reinforced. Could have been so much more based on what I've seen coming in the draft versions, which were later disregarded. Oh well, I personally feel it's a huge missed opportunity, but at least it has one section, which I'll share with you at the end. It has one section which is just so important, which is absolutely critical. There is one phrase in the standard which is just amazing. It's unbelievable. And here's the link to the article on ISO 31000. Now, quickly allow me to share some thoughts about COSO. What has changed? Okay, well, first, the structure and the way it looks changed significantly. In terms of ideas, unfortunately, not so much. And let me make this very clear, because this is a very weird argument that some people are using. COSO ERM 2017, it came out in, I can't remember, October or November. I think it was October. COSO ERM 2017 is so much better than COSO ERM 2004. It's a huge improvement on COSO ERM 2004. However, it is no improvement and no new ideas compared to ISO 31000 2009. So I wanted to make this message very clear. COSO ERM is a huge improvement on the old COSO. Unfortunately, that does not mean that the new COSO ERM is good or useful. All this means is the 2004 version was horrible. It was absolute, it was just the worst thing I've ever read in my risk professional career. I mean, I was just, thank God, I was so lucky to start my career in Australia, where we did not even know COSO ERM existed. Because when I came to Russia, and I was hit by all this marketing material from all the auditors, and Russia is so unlucky, because out of the two schools of thought, the American and the Australian, the American school of thought on terms of risk got to the Russian market earlier, thanks to all the big four auditors, and that was horrible. Every single implementation of risk management within the Russian companies that started in late 2000s was a complete failure. Not a single success story. It was a disaster. Every single one was a waste of time. Risk managers were fired right, left, and center because no executives could live with idiots who requested to do like massive risk registers and go through all the hurdles that COSO ERM 2004 suggested. So 17 version better than 2004. Is it a good change? No, of course it's not. I mean, anything you could take a piece of dirt and throw it in the water, and that would be better than 2004 version. So 2017 version, let's disregard the 2004 version because it's not a benchmark. The benchmark was ISO 31000 2009. So is the 17 version of COSO better than the ISO version of 2009? Not really, because there's nothing new. And in fact, the document that they ended up with is quite paradoxical. And I mean, it's paradoxical in a weird way. It's 257 pages. That is a huge book. And those are not small pages. This is A4 pages. So this is a huge, thick book. And the paradox is in the fact that so much text, and yet there's no practical details. It's all fluff. It's all water. It's all just naive, Captain Obvious, basic statements that governance is important and culture is important. I'll share those thoughts with you. And there's an article that that you can read on COSO. In fact, I've now written two. Actually, I've now written three that are available, and I'm showing in the comment section now. If you just want for some of those Captain Obvious phrases, but let me still go through the document. In terms of new ideas, is it useful in any way to the risk professionals? No, it's not. There's absolutely nothing. It's just I don't know. It was so painful to read, and I've read it back to back. I've paid a lot of attention. I've tried to squeeze any good ideas. It kind of starts with a good message, saying that integrating enterprise risk management practices throughout the organization improves decision making in governance strategy, objective setting, blah blah blah. It helps to enhance performance by more closely linking strategy and business objectives to risk. Wonderful message. And then it goes into so much unnecessary Wikipedia textbook-like discussion, which is actually, ironically, is not even about risk. It's all about like general governance. So it has 20 principles. This is the actual framework. It has 20 principles. And it goes through, it starts with like, the board of directors provides oversight of the strategy and carries out governance responsibilities to support management in achieving strategy and business objectives. And we go, wow, really? That's amazing. Tell us more, PwC. And then the next message is, organization establishes operating structures in the pursuit of strategy and business objectives. And you go, oh my God, thank you for telling us, because we never realized. And it just goes on and on and on and on. It goes into a lot of completely unnecessary, not very much related to risk management, just generic phrases that are so plainly obvious that you would have thought, like, why did you do that, PwC? Why make a document that at best is an worse, poorer quality copy of existing corporate governance codes, standards, and ISO 31000, because it literally says exactly the same things with some weird injections. It's actually, the document is, and I mean, I don't want to look too emotional about this, but this is literally the worst I have ever read in terms of risk. And I read dozens of articles every week, and US is notorious for some stupid writing on risk, but this is by far the worst. Which is kind of, again, ironic, because the girl who was writing is a friend of mine back from Australia when we started together in Deloitte. She's Australian, so I don't know why she writes this rubbish. But anyway, here's one of the weird messages in COSO. An organization that understands its mission and vision can set strategies that will yield your desired risk profile. I mean, I don't know about you, but to me, this is just bizarre. So the CEO, the CIO, and the CFO will come up with strategies for your desired risk profile, making us think that risk profile is first, and then the strategies have to kind of align with that, which of course is just nonsense. And then basically, so there are 5 kind of pillars. Governance and culture, interestingly enough, actually doesn't really talk about risk management much. It's just typical corporate governance stuff. You can find it in any good corporate governance code. In fact, probably better. And if you're thinking of like good corporate governance codes, South African King 3 is probably a good example. Strategy and objective setting. I mean, PwC decided to teach us how to do strategy and objective setting inside a risk framework, which is odd. There are a lot more authoritative and much more sophisticated thought papers on strategy and objective setting. Then third pillar they've called performance, which of course is a lie because it has nothing to do with performance. It's just a basic risk assessment. They've pulled all the risk assessment bits into the third pillar. Review and revision and communication and reporting, they're kind of the obvious monitoring and reporting bits like any other document on risk would have. Now, interestingly, every time the authors, the PwC, touch on actual risk subject, they do it wrong. And again, PwC are quite clever. To give them, I guess, to give them credit, they do mention a lot of useful things along the way. And they mention that, yes, there are cognitive science, technologies, and artificial intelligence, and you have to be cognizant of cognitive biases when performing activities. So they put a lot of useful placeholders to trying to protect the backside. But in reality, if you actually read carefully the document, it's basically a qualitative risk assessment. It's something that you should not be doing. So every time they talk about risk, they actually kind of fall back to the default, which is qualitative risk assessment, which is what people do now, which does not work and has a lot of limitations. And then finally, the only true innovation that PwC is proposing is this concept of risk profile. And this is just how bizarre the document is. 257 pages. It has 2 sections in the text dedicated to this risk profile concept and a whole appendix dedicated to risk profile. And do they explain how to do it? No. Not a lot of detail is provided. It's all high-level statements which you can't really argue for or against because it's so high level, it could mean anything. So I've actually done a small video on the risk profile, and when I tried to understand how to actually draw these graphs, and there are 2 ways. Now, there's a quantitative and a qualitative way, and PwC says there's a quantitative and a qualitative way. So thank you for that. They don't explain how to do either one, but at least they acknowledge that there are 2. So this whole concept of risk profile, if it's done quantitatively, it's exactly the same as Monte Carlo simulation. So this whole new amazing consulting concept that your auditors will be selling to you in the next year as something groundbreaking and wonderful is actually something that has been created in 1946 and has been extensively used since 1970s. I mean, this is what we use as a default for most of our decisions. For most of our significant business decisions, we use Monte Carlo simulations. And this is something that we have been using as a risk professionals for the last 10 or 20 years. I mean, to be completely fair, I have been using it for all of the business decisions I've been involved in for the last 7 years. So there are a lot of experts in the world who are much more advanced than I am in this approach. But this is what we use now for all the significant decisions. This is the best case scenario. The worst case scenario, the qualitative risk profile, as PwC is proposing, is just a basic risk assessment with a lot of qualitative statements, which is actually horrible. There's a lot of research on why you should not use qualitative risk assessment approaches. And let me just share with you this research. I keep sharing it, but this is very important. You must, if you're using qualitative risk methodology for your work, you must read this paper. It's research by Swedish and 2 US professors, and they've done a wonderful study. Make sure you know the real science behind the tools that you use. So unfortunately, COSO ERM There's not only there's no fresh ideas, there's nothing new. It's actually packaged. So and sorry, let me block the emotions. There's nothing new. The messages are not fundamentally wrong. The messages are quite good because they, like, everybody in the world kind of talks about the same thing. Risk has to be integrated into strategic planning, performance, decision making. Those are the same messages. So the messages are similar, if not the same, to ISO 31000, both the 2009 and 2018 versions. However, it's packaged in the horrible, horrible document. It's unbearable to read. It's unnecessarily long. Most of the case studies that are provided are just bottom line naive. They're so unreal that it's just embarrassing that somebody would write it. So all in all, a hugely disappointed effort by PwC, and I think this is just human greed at its finest. I mean, as a consultant, they could have embraced ISO 31000 and sold it and built all their methodologies based on ISO 31000, just like everybody did in Australia. Every single consultant embraced ISO 31000, and this is what they sell. Every single government agency embraced, every single large corporation embraced the standard, because this is the most widely accepted global international standard. It's now approved and formally translated and recognized in like 70 plus countries. You can't get better than that. And in fact, it's so high level that you can't find anything wrong with ISO 31000 because it's so high level. It could literally mean anything you want. So very disappointed by both COSO and PwC, who decided to make some marketing and some money out of something that turned out to be a very, very poor effort product. It's embarrassing. It's especially embarrassing when other big four companies trying to jump on the COSO bandwagon, or other consultants trying to jump on the bandwagon of COSO, because this is such an embarrassing, horrible product. But anyway, as a risk professionals, if you want, you can still read it. And in fact, before we go to the next vote, I do want to leave you with kind of a more philosophical message. Human brain works in a weird way. So sometimes reading even the most horrible, useless documents can, because it will be so useless and your brain will be bored, it will kind of deviate into other thoughts. So there is a very good possibility that by just reading the document, you will think of better ways of doing something, and that will be useful to you. So you will actually take away something, not from the document, but from the process of reading and questioning some of the messages in the document. So by all means, do have a look at both. And I'll wrap up on what to do with all this information. Yes, ISO 31000 hasn't changed much. Yes, COSO is a horrible addition, but, and let's do a quick vote. Do you think changes will be required to the approach that you're currently using in your organization based on the changes in the ISO 31000 and COSO ERM? And I'll give you a few seconds to vote. And again, don't be shy. There are more of you than are voting. Okay, let me close the poll, and let's see what we've got. Now, let me make this very clear on this question. Those of you who have answered no are very, very wrong. And let me explain why. This is just no is the worst possible answer you could have possibly um, could have possibly done. And I see the comments coming in. Thank you. I will come back to them. No is just the worst possible answer you could have given. And let me explain why. Because this is the last message. See the last message. Well, Hans, I will get back to your message. This is the reason why a no answer is wrong. Because what are the next steps? And the bottom line is the standard ISO 31000 hasn't changed much to what good risk managers were doing all the time. COSO ERM at best caught up with what ISO and good risk managers were doing in the past. And there's a lot of, every single one of you, I'm sure, has a lot of ideas and opportunities on how to make things even better. Even you, well, I mean, in all honesty, I actually don't think a risk manager exists on the planet that can say, I have integrated into all decisions, and I'm happy with how risk has been integrated. There's always more decision types, more business processes, more better quantitative risk analysis tools that can be integrated. So I want to leave you with a very important thought. Yes, the standards haven't changed. Yes, there's a lot of rubbish in COSO ERM. Do not tell that to anyone. Use this as an amazing opportunity to go to your decision makers, to speak to your supervisors, your executives, your audit committees, your auditors, your external auditors, and convince them that risk management has changed dramatically, and hence it's not you who needs to integrate into budgeting and strategic planning and procurement and maintenance and production forecasting and sales price identification. It's these new standards that require risk management to be integrated. So do not waste this opportunity. This is the very important thought that I mean, the whole reason why I even got this webinar, that you can, talking about ISO and COSO is actually not important, because I could have said it to you in the very beginning, not much changed. If you're doing good risk management, you're already well done. And since we all know you can always do better, and there are all those little battles that you have lost in the past and you left them or you parked them until a better time, well, now is the better time. Now is this 1 in a 10-year opportunity to go to your decision makers and say, let's give risk management another try, because this is what our standards and frameworks are now expecting. And tell them that the auditors will come and check the alignment with the new COSO ERM or the new ISO 31000. It doesn't matter, because if you're doing good risk management, you've already been aligned for 15 or 10 years. Tell them any argument you can possibly use to make sure you've given the green light to try something that you were not able to do. And I wanted to leave you, before I get to the questions, I wanted to leave you with the quote from the ISO 31000. It's section, I think, 5.3.2, called implementation. This is what ISO 31000 is saying implementation of risk management should look like. And this is groundbreaking stuff. It's saying identify where, when, and how different types of decisions are made across the organization. That's right. Do not worry about your quarterly or monthly or annual risk process that you've been running for the last 2 years. Go out and find out how decisions are made, because this is where the risk management should be. The next step is modify the applicable decision-making processes where necessary to be risk-based. I mean, this is groundbreaking. For most of us, but just so you know, this is what we've been doing for the last 10 years. This is groundbreaking. Change the decision-making process. Change how NPV is calculated. Change how IRR is calculated. Change how budgets are set. Change how KPIs on liquidity or cash flow are calculated. Change how business operates with risks in mind. This is what risk management is all about. And then the final step is ensure the organization arrangements for managing risks are clearly understood and practiced. That means teach people, give them tools, give them methodologies and quality control, and work together with internal audit to quality control. Those are the kind of the final messages that I wanted to leave you with. And this is just an image I drew a while back to put things in a perspective and to put things in a context. Heat maps, risk registers, kind of traditional risk management, that's for dinosaurs. That's prehistoric. However, most of the things that you hear about, COSA ERM, ISO 31000, objective-centric ERM, most what is called best practices, they are better than traditional risk management, but they're so insuperior, they're much worse than some of the more mathematical based approaches and tools that actually have been used by scientists since 1970s. Yet we're still completely ignoring them as risk professionals. Simulation, decision trees, modeling, tornado diagrams, this is what risk management, this is what good risk managers are doing. This is what we've been doing for years. So for us, COSA ERM 2017, ISO 31000 2018 are a walk in the park because that's what we've been doing for the last years. However, the future of risk management is not objective-centric. It's not risk profiles proposed by PwC. It's much more sophisticated. And risk management will continue to become more and more sophisticated, moving towards artificial intelligence, quantitative tools, and much more sophisticated tools. So, upgrade your skills. Do not when you're with risk registers, you still have an opportunity to upgrade to simulations and modeling. If you kind of waste that gap and you wait until artificial intelligence comes in, it will be impossible to catch up. You will become redundant. As a risk professional, you will lose your job. It's really that simple. Upgrade your skills as soon as you can. And now let me get back to questions. There is the risk management book that you can always download. It's free and it's available in your comment section. Let me now get back to your questions and quickly respond to them. Please keep the questions coming in, and I'll spend the next five to 10 minutes answering them. Hans is absolutely correct. The new elements are not new to best-in-class risk managers, but to everyone else focusing on traditional risk-averse, risk mitigation, minimization. They look like new. They're not new, but do not waste that opportunity. Pretend they're new, or they may be new to you, and use that to integrate into decision making. I too agree that COSA is too long, too cumbersome, and it is missing the point big time. It's bizarre. Okay, next question. And sorry, the postman just alarmed my dog. Hold on a sec. Okay. Next question. With Kantemir, I agree. Most previous implementations haven't been enough mature. True. Well, Hans actually raises a very interesting question. I mean, I don't think I'm on the same page here. I hear that argument a lot. Is that standards are written for the general public, and there are all the different kinds of maturities. And if you put mature practices explicitly in the standard, then most of the organizations will not be able to comply. And hence, qualitative risk tools and risk registers and heat maps may still be appropriate. Um, I would generally agree, except there's so much science now that and research, which I've one of the things that I've shared with you in the comments, to suggest that qualitative risk tools not only less effective, they're actually deceitful, and they it's better to not do anything than to do a lot of the traditional risk management. So I mean, in fact, um, some of the practices are so bad that no argument about maturity can justify using them. So I don't know. I would maybe in my naive, idealistic view of the world, I would actually strive for a better, more complicated approach than settle for something not just average, something below average. Moving on to the next question. Yes, good idea for the G30,000, no doubt. Guy is saying people struggle with how to change from risk register review approach, hence why managers happy with risk registers. Well, it's a complex it's a complex question. The business doesn't care what risk managers show them, because most of them don't really pay attention to risk that much. What I have noticed is that when I stopped using heat maps and risk registers and started bringing distributions and showing how risks affect the budgets or investment company valuations or the cash flow of the company, the CEO and the executive said, now that suddenly makes sense and we can use that to make better business decisions. And they never looked back. As soon as they saw what better risk management tools and what insights that can provide, they never really looked back. The struggle is that most risk managers themselves don't have the competencies to produce those better insights, and that's why they come up with any excuse possible to defend the traditional kind of qualitative risk approach to risk management. To which I'm saying it's actually it's just going to be worse as we move on. It will be quantitative risk analysis, then it will be chatbots, then it will be artificial intelligence, then God knows what. It will be much more technological as we go through. It's not going to suddenly revert back to human discussions and emotional feelings. It's actually going to be more and more mathematical. So there's really no excuse for not upskilling and starting to use proper, more scientific risk tools. I mean, the thing that I'm most worried about is that I can simulate 10,000 scenarios in like 15 minutes, and I think in decision trees, but I'm really worried that I do not understand artificial intelligence well enough. And we're actually investing a lot of effort into learning all those skills and combining our risk expertise with blockchain specialists and artificial intelligence specialists to use more analytics in our decision making. So unfortunately, um, those people who struggle will continue to struggle unless they drastically change their approach to upskilling. Hans asking about risk reports should be audit based. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand. Well, it seems to make sense to you. I'm not sure I understand the question, but it seems we're in agreement. Kantemir, I exactly agree. If you need a new idea, read the old book. Some of the risk theory based on 50s, 60s, 70s still stands. And the weird thing about risk management is that it moved. The first ever article I wrote in English was risk management used to be a science, then it became an art. Now it's just bullshit. And we used to get our risk management tools and ideas from scientists. Now we get them from big four consultants. And that is just insanity. I mean, these people have never came up with anything in terms of risk. They've never came up with anything groundbreaking or fundamental. I mean, in fact, they're probably 10 or 20 years behind in their thinking. So this is just this change is just weird. There may be executives who believe cost ERM and is a good thing, and that's why they think risk management is a compliance exercise. It's something that has to be done. It's a necessary evil. You do it once a year or once a quarter, and then you can kind of forget about it. Which again is there is a much better way of doing that. To me, risk management is not an activity. Risk management is a decision-making tool. And in fact, it should be differently applied to any kind of important business decision within the organization. We totally agree on intelligent risk-taking. A huge problem is that audits are wedded to COSO. It's their Bible. Well, I mean, Guy, I don't know what country you're viewing this from. In US, maybe. In Australia, no auditors will ever even mention COSO. In Russia, some of the auditors do, and they're immediately shut down by the risk managers, and they're just laughed at by the risk professionals. So no, not really. They're not really wedded. And you know, if we're completely honest, if you can't convince an external auditor to do what you want them to do, it is, and I'm not saying you, Guy, as a person, I'm just saying you as a risk professional in general, convincing external auditors to do what we want them to do is one of the easiest things we have to face in our careers. When convincing a CFO to integrate risk management into budgeting is a much more difficult game. So it's not the worst thing that we have to deal with. Hans, yeah, I saw your comments, so that's fine. Jomar is asking, but shouldn't companies start somewhere? I have like a 20-second fun video to talk about that. Shouldn't the company start somewhere? Well, to our embarrassment, what we usually discover is that some parts of our organizations are already using more sophisticated risk management tools than what risk managers are proposing. For example, any finance department uses sensitivity and scenario analysis. It's a given. Every budget has 3 scenarios. Most engineers use Monte Carlo simulations. Some of the marketing staff use big data analytics. So if you're saying, shouldn't we start somewhere? Well, there are already places in the organization that have started with something more sophisticated. So yes, of course you should start somewhere. But if somebody in the organization is already using sophisticated tools, then it is absolutely silly to use something less advanced than something that is already used by the organization. So I have this fun video which says how to test your risk maturity in 20 seconds. It's really easy. If somebody is in your organization is using a risk management tool that is more sophisticated than what the risk manager is using, then he's not a good risk manager. Risk management should be the center of excellence for dealing with uncertainty, for quantifying uncertainty, for measuring uncertainty, for taking it into account when making decisions. So no, there's very few companies in the world where qualitative risk assessments would be a good place to start. It's really that simple. And this whole maturity thing, this is just an excuse. I mean, you could have just anyway. Sorry, I'm not going to go into the more negative words. What do I think about the correlation between organization risk management maturity? Organization management maturity and risk maturity. Does it make sense to implement risk management and processes with low management culture? It's a very fair question, and the answer is very simple. If we're saying risk management is all about integration, then the next question is very simple as well. Then we have to integrate into something, right? If we want to integrate into decision making, we presume that decision making is formalized. If we want to integrate into budgeting, we assume that that budgeting is formalized, structured, and transparent. Now, if in rare cases where that does not exist, where there are no formalized processes, nothing is documented, no risk management can be done. I mean, there are many advices for the risk manager, and I've just yesterday I've answered the same question via email. There are really two options. Either wait, well, actually there are three options. Wait for somebody to formalize the processes and improve the organizational maturity in general, and then integrate. Second option, do it yourself. So start driving the business processes, formalizing them, documenting, work with internal audit or internal control or strategic department or finance department to formalize and update policies and procedures. And I've seen that. I mean, I've created myself a whole back office expertise business process to allow risk management to be integrated. And a friend of mine, the head of risk of one of the airlines, created an operations planning daily meetings to make sure he had somewhere to integrate into his risk information. So it's not unheard of. Or the third scenario is leave the organization. Some organizations are just hopeless, and you could technically kind of play the compliance game, and risk management does have benefits outside of the decision makers. Risk management as a facade for the government agencies, for the regulators, for the external auditors, for the banks and the insurance companies. The facade risk management can still save money, and that could be useful. Then you kind of refocus away from decision makers to this artificial risk management. But those are the options that you have. I agree with Hans. You can always do you can always do better. True, ISO does not get credit for the inventing of continuous improvement. Of course it doesn't. But I think you would agree that it's actually easier to come to the CEO and CFO and say, let's embark on this change, because that's what ISO is expecting us to do. As a risk professional, we always look for some sort of regulatory hooks, some sort of external guidelines that will justify what we are doing. Otherwise, it's just my word against your word. Well, we try to back it up with some sort of guidelines. COSA framework tends to be used as an evaluation tool, possibly in the past, although there are a few evaluation tools coming out based on the ISO as well, including some maturity models and including the maturity model by the G31000 that I have been involved in, and that equally provides quite a good baseline. COSO does focus on linking risk management to governance, as does ISO 31000, and as does any other document or framework ever available. Let's continue. Let's praise artificial intelligence, but who sets the objectives? I guess it's more a philosophical question. If a small company wants to initiate risk management, what is the first step they need to understand their risk profile? Jamar, this is a very good question. They do not need to understand their risk profile. Risk profile is not a real thing. Risk profile you need to understand for your curiosity's sake. Nobody cares what a risk profile of an organization is. If a small business if a small business is trying to initiate risk management, they should start with whatever important decision they are making. Usually it's setting up the strategy or formulating the budget, and they should integrate risk into that activity. And in fact, I said both strategy and budget. In fact, they already use, even the small businesses already use scenarios. So already that's quantitative. So there's absolutely no need to start with qualitative risk assessment in any way. In fact, this is how, let me just send you the link. This is how integrating into strategic planning this is how integration into strategic planning looks like. In the book, the whole first chapter is dedicated to that, which you will find useful. If you're not able to download the book, this is the backup address. You may not be able to download it because it's blocked in your country. It does happen sometime. Kantemir, what's the question? What's the practical question? Who sets the objectives of what? I'm happy to try and answer that, but you have to give me a little bit more detail. I've answered all the questions that you've written in. Thank you so much for your contribution. If you have any other thoughts, please share with me. You can write in the chat. If you feel uncomfortable, you can always write to me on LinkedIn. And by all means, I encourage you to connect with me on LinkedIn. And yeah, by all means, please write by email. And you can always read the latest posts in the Risk Academy blog. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this was interesting to you, and keep your comments coming in underneath the videos that I keep publishing on YouTube or LinkedIn. Thank you and goodbye.